about what they call this, the Transfiguration. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Today we read the same thing with Mark. John never wrote the narrative of the Transfiguration. Look at it and prove me wrong. Okay? However, there is a reason for it. For Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the manifestation of Jesus' divinity and glory was in his resurrection. Glorious resurrection. But for John, it was different. The manifestation of Jesus' glory and divinity was his crucifixion. The apex of Jesus' life. In John, everything that he narrated, if you look at the narrative of John, moves towards Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is where Jesus was crucified. That is the apex of Jesus' life. Because to the crucifixion, Jesus really proved who he was. He was a human being. He died. But he was also divine. Because he did not overcome sin by evil. He overcame sin by good. The ultimate sacrifice of giving oneself for the others, for sinners. What is more divine than that? Of course, they have different orientations because they were what we call this. They were talking to different audiences. And in the context that we're reading today, the context of the gospel that we're reading today, if you read before that, this is chapter 17. Chapter 16, okay? The narrative in chapter 16 tells us about the incident in which Jesus asked his apostles, who do you think people say that I am? And it was only Peter that says, Lord, you are the Messiah, the Son of God. A real proclamation of the divinity of Jesus. Okay? But after that, Jesus tells them, I am going to be crucified. I am going to be, what they call this, I am going to be put to death. And unless somebody who wants to follow me takes up his cross and dies, he cannot be my disciple. That's the context of this narrative. After that, Jesus brings Peter, James, and Andrew into the mountain to be with him alone. And what happened there? Jesus gave them a sneak preview of who he was and what they could be. After telling them that, hey, you cannot follow me until you die and suffer in the cross and take up your cross. What was Jesus telling them? Was giving them a glimpse of the future, of who they are meant to be, so that their sacrifices are worth it. He was giving them the big picture. You know, I've always liked planes. In fact, before I became a priest, I always wanted to be a pilot. Today, that's still my dream. My bucket list. One of these days, I'm going to fly a plane. And every time I take a plane, I always get the window seat. Why? Because when you fly, take off, you see the beauty, the order, not only of creation and man's, what they call as construction. Up there, you have a very good vantage sight of what the whole thing is all about. So that when you go down, you see the meaning of where you are. Things make sense from up there. While you are down here, things to be, mayhem. The upper view gives you a sense of order, a sense of direction. And that's exactly what the Transfiguration is all about. The Transfiguration is not just about Jesus being transfigured in front of the 3 disciples, the 3 apostles. The Transfiguration is also the transformation of Peter, James, and Andrew in how they saw Jesus and how they understood themselves in front of Jesus. The first time we went to New York, that was way back, came to visit here on a vacation, way back in, what was the name? 89? 95. First thing that my cousin brought me to was, we went to the top of the rock. You know where the top of the rock is? Rockefeller Center. Went there. And from there you can see the beauty and the sense of how Manhattan was designed according to Bates. The other time, the last 2 days, he brought me to the time of the tower. It was simply the tower. And it was also beautiful. You see how beautiful, you see the what they call as the vision of the designer of the whole place, of the whole city. That's why it's so easy to go around Manhattan. Uptown, downtown, north, south, north and south. That's it. I can go around Manhattan blindfolded in a subway. That's because it's so easy, it's green. But that's what the vantage point tells us. You know, in the gospel, in the Bible, the mountain always occupies a very special place. A very unique place where it is a unique place for meeting God. In the Old Testament, we have Mount Horeb. What is Mount Horeb? Mount Horeb is the place where Moses first encountered God. The burning bush. And what did Moses learn about God in that burning bush? While he was about to approach, the voice came out, "Take off your shoes, because you're walking on a sacred ground." And then God, Yahweh, told them to go to his people and tell them that I am going to free you from the clutches of slavery in Egypt. And Moses said, "If they tell me, who told you to tell us this?" And Yahweh said, "Tell them, I am who am." Very deep. I am who am. Meaning to say, I am God, was no beginning and end. That's why for the Jews, they could never pronounce the name of God. Because giving a name to a person is controlling that person. So every time they read the Old Testament and the name of God is there, they would say another name, El Shaddai or Yahweh. Okay? Because for them, God was totally other, totally holy. It was there that Moses understood who God was in the Mount of Horeb. The second incident, Mount Sinai. What happened at Mount Sinai? Mount Sinai was where Moses or Yahweh made a covenant to his people and gave them the 10 Commandments. And what was the beginning of the 10 Commandments? Which is at the core of every other law that we have. I am the Lord your God. You shall worship no other God than me. God alone is God. No other one. That defined the relationship with Him. And every time the Israelites veered towards other directions, they would always be reminded, remember this, at Mount Sinai, God says, I am the Lord your God, you shall not worship other gods. The prophets always reminded them of the big picture of the covenant that they have with God. Because everything else makes sense in relation to that covenant. For us Christians in the Transfiguration, it's the same. What we do as Christians, who we are as Christians, makes sense and makes meaning only in relation to who we are and what we are in front of God. Yes, we are sinners, but we are also redeemed, adopted sons and daughters of God. That's who we are. We are called to holiness, to be God's presence in the world. And this is important for us to go into a once in a while, to go into our mountain, to search that mountain every day and go up that mountain and be still and to know once again and imbibe once again what God wants us to be and understand it. That's why yesterday I was sharing it. Make it a point, create that space of silence every day where you do anything else except to listen to the God within you. To listen to the God within you, not telling Him what you want Him to do for you. Why? Because that's how we transform ourselves into the image and likeness of Jesus Christ. It's important for us, my dear brothers and sisters, to go into this exercise, but it's also scary. It's scary because when we see ourselves who we are, there are only two things that can happen. One, we can get really discouraged and despair. And second, by the grace of God, we still struggle and hope. That's why when Jesus appeared to the three apostles, what happened to them? They were scared. They were scared. And for us to be the same. That's why sometimes we don't want to be in silence because we're scared for what we will see. But it is an exercise we need to do. It's a humbling experience, but I tell you, it's also a redeeming experience. We cannot stay all the time in the mountain. Sometimes the experience with God will really be beautiful, peaceful, redeeming, happy, and joyful. That's up there, a transfiguration. And so when Peter and James said, Peter said, Lord, it's great to be here. Let us put up some 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. And what did Jesus say? No, we go down. We go down the valley. Because it is in the valley that you realize your vocation as apostles. It is in the valley, working with the people, living with the people, that we realize our vocations as sons and daughters of God. That's why from that time on, the journey was towards Jerusalem, towards the crucifixion and resurrection. That's what the Transfiguration tells us, my dear brothers and sisters. To also appreciate the value of the ordinary things that come our way. You know, there is this 19th century poet, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who wrote, earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush is afire with God. But only he who sees and takes off his shoes sits. He who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sits around and pluck blackberries. In other words, the glory of God is all around us. It's not just in the mountain. It just gives, the mountain gives us simply the glimpse. It is in the valley, in the marketplace, in the privacy of our room, in the public square. It is amazing that the second reading today, that the reading today is also the second reading of Lent. And all the readings today is about pointing about to the glory of God. And I would like to conclude by quoting Saint Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyons. And he said, "The glory of God is the human person fully alive." Today, we're called, you and I, to see the glory of God all around us and to be charged like Peter, James, and Andrew at Mount Tabor, so that the world will see the glory of God in each and every one of us. God bless you.